They tried to curse you, but ended up awakening you. There comes a moment in every life when the world turns dark, not because the sun has set, but because someone tried to dim your light. You didn't ask for it. You didn't provoke it. But suddenly, without warning, you became a target of rumors, of judgment, of betrayal, of silent looks and whispered curses. People who once smiled with you began to speak against you. People you trusted began to twist your name. And the most painful part? It wasn't always strangers. Sometimes, it was those closest to you. You see, people don't always attack what is weak. They often attack what is becoming strong. And in their fear of your growth, in their discomfort with your potential, they tried to curse you. Not with spells or rituals, but with words, with doubt, with gossip, with rejection, with manipulation. They wanted to silence your spirit, to bury your identity, to suffocate your truth. But what they didn't realize is that pressure doesn't only break things. Pressure also awakens things. What they meant as poison became your medicine. What they meant to destroy you became the very fire that refined you. You didn't crumble under the curse. They unintentionally awakened a version of you that you didn't even know was sleeping. Because the truth is, there was always something divine in you. Something deep, something unshakable, something they couldn't touch, no matter how hard they tried. But it took the betrayal, the humiliation, the darkness, for you to go within and find it. You didn't wake up because life was gentle. You woke up because life forced you to fight. And in that fight, you found clarity. You found courage. You found you. This is not a story of revenge. This is not a message about proving them wrong. No, this is something far greater. This is about understanding the sacred irony of pain. The very people who wanted to break you ended up blessing you. Not by intention, but by the law of transformation. What was meant as a curse became the catalyst. What was sent to destroy you ended up revealing your destiny. So if you're still bleeding from wounds they caused, don't hide your scars. Don't shrink to make others comfortable. And above all, don't regret the pain. Because that pain woke you up. It made you conscious. It stripped away illusion and forced you into purpose. This is your awakening story. And it begins with a curse that failed and a spirit that rose in defiance of it. The curse that was meant to break you. There was a time in your life when you couldn't quite explain what was happening. You could feel the shift in energy before you had the language to define it. People began treating you differently, not with open hostility, but with quiet disdain, subtle shade, silent sabotage. At first, you doubted yourself. You thought maybe you were overthinking. You gave them the benefit of the doubt. You tried harder, gave more, smiled wider, hoping your goodness would speak louder than their intentions. But the more you gave, the more they took. The more you loved, the more they resented. And slowly, you realized it wasn't you. It was what you carried. It was what you represented. It was the light inside you they couldn't handle. You see, some people don't have the courage to fight their own darkness, so they try to extinguish anyone who reminds them of what they've refused to heal. You became a mirror, reflecting their insecurities, their bitterness, their fear. And instead of doing the work to grow, they chose the easier route, to attack, to diminish, to curse. They didn't curse you with spells. No, their curses were far more common, far more insidious. They cursed you with judgment, with labels, with exclusion. They whispered lies behind your back. They painted your truth as arrogance, your confidence as a threat, your uniqueness as a flaw. They isolated you not because you were weak, but because you were different. And difference has always frightened the mediocre. It wasn't just what you said or did, it was who you were becoming. And what they couldn't control, they tried to crush. They saw something in you, something rare, something radiant, and rather than be inspired, they felt small next to it. So they set out to shrink you, to wound you in ways that words alone could not explain. They used silence as a weapon, rejection as a tool, manipulation as their strategy. And you, being the soul you are, still tried to make it work. You still tried to belong. You still questioned yourself, wondering what you did wrong, wondering why love turned cold in their hands. But the truth is, you did nothing wrong. In fact, you did everything right. You walked with authenticity in a world that profits from pretense. You chose truth in a culture that celebrates masks. You had the courage to grow, and that made you a target. What they intended to be a curse was never really about you. It was about them, about their fears, their wounds, their unhealed stories. But you, unknowingly, became the place where their darkness tried to land. And it hurt. It broke something open inside of you. Because betrayal is a wound unlike any other. When someone you trusted turns their back, when someone you loved uses your kindness against you, it can feel like a kind of spiritual violence. And if you're not careful, you begin to believe that you deserved it. That maybe you were too much. That maybe you should have stayed small. That maybe you should have kept your mouth shut, your light dimmed, your soul folded neatly to fit in their box. But that's the danger of curses. They are designed to distort your perception, to make you forget who you are, to convince you to abandon yourself before you even realize you're doing it. And that's exactly what they hoped would happen. They wanted you to shrink, to hide, to give up on yourself, because your presence reminded them of their own absence. Your voice reminded them of their silence. Your movement reminded them of how long they've been standing still. But here's the part they never saw coming. While they were busy trying to curse you, something deeper was happening inside you. Something ancient, something sacred. The pain began to awaken your awareness. The rejection began to strengthen your resolve. The betrayal began to sharpen your vision. Every lie they told about you only made you search harder for the truth. Every door they slammed in your face forced you to build a door of your own. And little by little, without even realizing it, the very curse they tried to use to break you became the force that began to build you. They thought they were burying you, but they were planting you. They thought they were silencing you, but they were setting the stage for your voice to echo louder than ever. They thought they were breaking you, but in reality, they were cracking the shell of the old you, so the real you could be born. What they meant for harm, the universe used for good. And in that, there is a deep, almost poetic justice. Because no curse, no matter how carefully crafted, can destroy someone who knows who they are. And even when you didn't yet fully know who you were, something inside you refused to die. Something in you said, keep going. Something in you whispered, you are not what they said you are. And that voice, quiet as it was, saved you. So now, you look back and realize the curse didn't win. It never stood a chance. Because your spirit was stronger. Your purpose was louder. Your light was rooted in something no human opinion could uproot. And this is only the beginning of your becoming. Awakening through adversity. Adversity has a way of showing us who we really are. Not in the calm, not in the moments when everything is going right, but in the fire, in the chaos, in the nights when sleep won't come and silence feels loud. That's where the real awakening begins. You see, no one chooses pain. No one wakes up and says, let me be betrayed today. But when the betrayal comes, when the world flips on you and the people you love turn cold, there is something sacred buried in that sorrow. A doorway, a mirror, a call to rise. At first, you resist it. You want to go back. You want to undo it. You replay conversations. You wish you had walked away sooner. You wonder if you should have seen the signs. But you didn't see them because you weren't meant to avoid the pain. You were meant to go through it. Because some awakenings don't come gently. Some awakenings are violent ruptures, tears in the fabric of your identity, so you can finally see what was beneath the surface all along. Adversity is not your enemy. It's your teacher. It arrives with no warning, no softness, no apology. But it arrives with a lesson, one that you could never learn through comfort. In adversity, you learn that people are not always what they seem. You learn that loyalty has limits, and not everyone clapping for you wants to see you win. You learn to stop outsourcing your worth to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You learn how to stand up in rooms where no one is standing with you. And most importantly, you learn how to come home to yourself, without needing anyone else to open the door. The curses they threw at you were not just meant to break your heart, they were meant to break your spirit. But your spirit is not made of glass. It's forged in the fire. It's made of the prayers your grandmother whispered when no one else was listening. It's made of the dreams you kept hidden in the quiet corners of your mind. It's made of the strength you inherited from generations who survived things no history book will ever write about. You were never weak. You were just unaware of your power. And pain had to remind you. There's something remarkable that happens when you hit bottom and survive. You stop pretending. You stop performing. You stop trying to be who they wanted. And you start becoming who you were meant to be. The adversity forces you to strip away every false identity you were wearing, every mask you thought you needed to be accepted. It pushes you into the dark room of your soul, and it says, look at the wounds. Look at the scars. Look at what you've been carrying. And for the first time, you do? You face the mirror not with shame, but with the quiet courage of someone who's tired of lying to themselves. And then comes the shift. The moment when you stop asking, why did they hurt me? And you start asking, what did this hurt awaken in me? That is the turning point. That is when the curse loses its grip. That is when you begin to rise. Not in vengeance, not in bitterness, but in clarity, in ownership, in truth. Because when you've been through enough storms, you stop chasing validation. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't want to understand. You stop waiting for apologies that will never come. You learn that peace is not something you find in others. It's something you create within. The adversity doesn't stop hurting overnight. But the awakening begins the moment you realize the pain had purpose. Every tear you cried was watering a deeper version of you. Every sleepless night was stripping away illusions. Every rejection was rerouting you back to your power. And somewhere along the way, without fanfare, without anyone noticing, you became different. You stopped needing permission. You stopped seeking approval. You began to walk like someone who knew they'd been through hell and survived. And that kind of awakening, it's not loud. It's not flashy. It doesn't show up on social media. It shows up in your choices, in your boundaries, in your stillness, in the way you now say no without guilt, in the way you protect your peace without apology, in the way you love yourself enough to walk away from what no longer serves your becoming. Adversity may have been the invitation, but awakening is the transformation. And it changes everything. The way you see people, the way you see yourself. You stop needing to be understood, and you start needing to be authentic. You stop chasing love, and you start choosing alignment. You realize that everything they meant to harm you has only made you, more whole, more wise, more powerful than they could have ever imagined. And maybe that's the greatest irony of it all. They thought they were cursing you, but they were preparing you to wake up, preparing you to rise, preparing you to lead, to heal, to teach, to shine. And now that you've awakened, there is no going back. You've tasted truth. You've met your soul. You've seen what lies beyond the mask of survival. And now you walk differently. You speak differently. You move with intention. Because you know what it costs to stay asleep, and you refuse to ever go numb again. This is the gift of adversity. Not the pain itself, but the awakening that comes from it. And though it was never what you wanted, it became exactly what you needed. Rising in power they never saw coming. There is a quiet kind of power that comes after pain. It doesn't scream. It doesn't demand to be seen. It simply is. It walks into the room before you do. It lives in your posture, your stillness, your certainty. And the beautiful thing is, they never saw it coming. Those who tried to curse you, to bury you, to silence you, they were so focused on your suffering that they forgot something crucial. Some people don't die in the dark. Some people resurrect there. You were not supposed to survive. That's the part they'll never say out loud. They didn't just hurt you. They hoped you would disappear, that you would stay broken, that the betrayal would ruin you so deeply you'd never find your way back. Because if you stayed wounded, you'd stay small. You'd stay silent. You'd stay out of their way. But what they failed to understand is that your soul was made of stronger material. It was not your ego that rose. It was your essence, the part of you that's been waiting to awaken. And when it did, everything changed. They were watching for your downfall, but instead, they witnessed your becoming. And it didn't happen in one glorious moment. It happened gradually, painfully, beautifully. You started choosing yourself. You started walking away from things that drained you, even when it hurt. You stopped explaining your worth. You stopped performing for love. You started speaking with the authority of someone who has walked through fire and found gold in the ashes. You began to reclaim every part of yourself they tried to distort. They said you were too emotional. You realized your emotions were your compass. They said you were too sensitive. You discovered your sensitivity was a gift, not a weakness. They said you were difficult, dramatic, unstable. But what you actually were was awake. And they didn't know what to do with that. Because an awakened person can no longer be controlled. You stopped reacting. You started responding. You stopped begging. You started building. You stopped asking for a seat at their table and created your own. Your silence became sacred. Your boundaries became firm. Your energy became expensive. And the same people who once mocked you now don't know how to access you. Not because you're arrogant, but because you've elevated. And elevation comes with separation. Let them misunderstand you. Let them mislabel your growth as ego. They don't need to understand what was never meant for them to carry. Your healing isn't about convincing them of your transformation. It's about embodying it so fully that they can't deny it, no matter how much they try. You owe no one an explanation for your rise, especially not the ones who cursed your fall. What they feared most wasn't your pain, it was your power. They were never scared of who you were when you were broken. They were scared of who you'd become once you stood back up. Because when someone rises after being torn apart, they carry a kind of wisdom that no book, no classroom, no title can give. They've earned their insight. They've walked through their fear. And they now know exactly who they are. You, my friend, have become that person. You've tapped into a power they never expected. Not the kind that dominates, but the kind that liberates. You've become grounded, whole, clear, and most dangerous of all, you're no longer easily swayed by praise or criticism. You've developed spiritual muscle, emotional discernment, inner authority. You know what alignment feels like, and you refuse to betray yourself again just to be accepted. And the world begins to shift around you. New people arrive, real ones, people who see you, not because you've contorted yourself to fit, but because you've expanded into who you really are. You find love again, not the kind that requires shrinking, but the kind that honors your fullness. Opportunities open, not because you chased them, but because you became the version of yourself that attracts them. And as all this unfolds, you realize the irony. The people who tried to curse you played a role in your elevation. Without knowing it, they pushed you deeper into your healing. They drove you into solitude, where you found your truth. They locked you out of places that were never meant to hold your destiny. They triggered the very pain that led you to purpose. So, in some strange way, you almost thank them. Not because what they did was right, but because what they did woke something up in you that nothing else could. You're not rising to prove anything. You're rising because you've outgrown the version of yourself that was built around survival. You're no longer surviving. You're living. You're no longer questioning your worth. You're honoring it. You're no longer reacting to the noise. You're listening to your own knowing. And that's power. True power. The kind they never imagined you'd hold. So if you're still rebuilding, still healing, still finding your voice, keep going. The power you are rising into cannot be rushed, and it cannot be faked. It is earned. And every scar you carry is a part of that currency. Don't hide them. Wear them like armor. Let your rise be slow, sacred, and undeniable. Because the people who try to curse you, they underestimated what you were made of. But now, they don't get to define you. They only get to watch. And that is the most poetic justice of all. The irony of their curse becoming your calling. There's a sacred irony that life often saves for those who suffer in silence. A twist in the story so profound, it could only have been written by something greater than human hands. And that irony is this. The very thing they meant to curse you with became the reason you found your calling. Yes, the curse, the betrayal, the abandonment, the rejection, the pain, it didn't just push you into survival. It pushed you into purpose. It opened doors you never would have walked through unless the ones behind you had been slammed shut. It forced you to discover gifts you didn't know you had, strength you didn't know was buried inside you, and a depth of wisdom you never would have touched if life had stayed easy, if people had stayed loyal. They tried to silence you, but all they did was amplify your voice. They tried to isolate you, but all they did was set the stage for your transformation. They tried to make you doubt yourself, but instead, they exposed the parts of you that still needed healing. They tried to curse your path, but their curse became your compass. You began to see it, didn't you? Slowly at first. A conversation here. A moment of clarity there. You started noticing how your pain made you more empathetic, more real, more awake to the pain of others. You started feeling pulled, not just toward healing yourself, but toward helping others do the same. That's when you realized your calling didn't arrive with applause. It arrived disguised as heartbreak. Your purpose wasn't born in applause. It was born in your private suffering. And now, you walk in a different light. You walk with the understanding that nothing you went through was wasted. Not one tear, not one sleepless night, not one time you questioned if you'd make it. It all mattered. It all led you here. The same story that once brought you shame now carries your message. The same wound that once made you feel weak has become the place where your power lives. That's the irony they never saw coming. While they were plotting your downfall, they were unknowingly pushing you into destiny. And now, their attempt to curse you has become a testimony, a living, breathing reminder that even the darkest forces cannot override what has already been written for you. The curse didn't break you. It built you. And you're not the only one who benefits from that. That's the beauty of a true calling. It's never just about you. Your rise lifts others. Your healing becomes a path for those still in pieces. Your voice echoes in the minds of those who feel like no one understands. Because now you do. Now, you are the person you once needed. And no amount of revenge or vindication could ever compete with the fulfillment of that. You don't need them to say sorry. You don't need them to admit what they did. You don't need them to recognize the growth, the work, the transformation. Because you're no longer living for their recognition, you're living for your mission. And the irony is, if they hadn't cursed you, you may have never discovered it. That doesn't make what they did right. But it does make what came from it redeemed. You're not here by accident. You're not rising by coincidence. Everything was aligning even in the chaos. The universe, God, the divine, whatever name you give it, was working behind the scenes, rearranging your pain into purpose, your wounds into wisdom. And now, you understand, the curse was never the end. It was only the beginning. You've become someone they can't categorize anymore. You're not the victim. You're not the broken one. You're not the one who stayed stuck in the betrayal. You're the phoenix, the warrior, the healer, the teacher, the leader, the light in rooms still filled with shadows. And for those still wondering why they had to go through what they went through, for those still walking through their own darkness, let your life be the evidence. Let your story be the sign. Let them see what happens when you don't give up, when you don't let bitterness harden you, when you don't let the curse define you. You took what was meant for your destruction and turned it into a foundation. And on that foundation, you are building something that will outlive you, whether it's a legacy, a message, a movement, or simply the lives you touch along the way. So when they look at you now, they won't see the version of you they once tried to break. They'll see someone who rose, not in spite of their curse, but because of it. They'll see someone who turned pain into prophecy, someone who turned wounds into wisdom, someone who turned silence into a song. And maybe, just maybe, they'll realize they didn't curse you at all. They activated you.